Well, the fabulous foursome are here again. We could have it no other way with the day that's been happening in the life of Boris Johnson. What an amazing day we've had already. It's now 4:30. We're not exactly sure what's going to happen in the next hour, not to mind the next day, not to mind the next week. We've had basically an amazing thing, which I don't think any of us has ever actually seen in Parliament before, where you have Christian Wakeford essentially changing parties in the middle of the day. We've had calls for Boris to go. We've also had William Kedjanyi meeting Steve Bray outside of Parliament. Let's look at this. This happened, let me see, half an hour ago. And this is what's happened earlier when William Kedjanyi met some people who had some strong views on Boris.
And here they are. It's the very same. It's off Newsnight fame. It's off Newsnight fame. Hello, Steve.
What's the odds on Boris being toppled?
Well, we got some. We got the odds on Boris being toppled.
What's that? The face of vote, no confidence, yes, no? 5 to 6 on.
Yeah, there we are. We got those odds. I'm doing a little thing the way for work. Everybody say hi to Steve.
Hi, Steve.
Hello, Steve.
Top man.
No worries. Paul is calling you a top man. I think he was a big fan of
Thank
your.
you, Paul.
This is absolutely unreal.
Did you see Newsnight
Keep
the
up
other
the
day?
good work, my friend. Keep up the
With
good work.
Richard?
He says, "Keep up the good work, my friend."
Thank
He is
you
a
very
very
much,
enthusiastic supporter. Did you see Newsnight? Did you see Newsnight, Paul?
Yes, I did. How did you pull that off? I just don't know.
Hold on. I honestly speak to properly. Paul, give us some words. Can you?
That was amazing. Yeah, I saw it on Newsnight. Superb. I don't know how they got away with it.
Hold on. I'll get up. Don't. Try again.
Yeah, I saw that on Newsnight. Fantastic. I don't know how you got away with that. But keep it up, mate. Keep it up. Someone's got to oppose them.
Absolutely. Thank you, Paul.
No worries.
That's your boss.
No, he's not my boss. He's a good friend of mine who's going to be on something we record. It's called The Polling Station, and we do it about latest political developments and odds regarding that. Paul.
Hi, guys.
Is the party over?
Hello, and this is also Johnny from Ireland.
Oh, Johnny!
Hi, guys. EU flag and all.
Hello.
Come back. Join us again.
Oh, nice setup there.
There you go. Look at that. You've got to detail your setup. It says nice setup.
Anything compromising?
Nothing compromising so far, but you never know, because we haven't even got Neil Channing in yet.
We don't. William, it's all happening live from outside Parliament. What is going on?
Okay, so today we have had at least 12 letters of no confidence in Boris Johnson going. Cecil Graham-Brady, chair of the 1922 committee. We've had a defection from the Conservative Party to Labour. I think the first one since 2007. I'm sure I'm wrong on that, but that feels like the about right time frame to me. And we've also had a new market on. And if I can flip this camera, then you'll see it.
Yes.
And indeed, Johnson to face no confidence vote by the 1st of February. We're still 5 to 6 each of 2 on that.
I can see an avalanche of people running across the road to get on.
Sorry.
I can just see an avalanche of people running across from Parliament to have a bet on insider information here, because this is such a revolving story.
Yeah. Well, Dan Hodges is saying it's done. It'll be done by 5.
Well, can't you just get yourself in
we're hearing on
the
Twitter.
ERG WhatsApp group so they can just send you the bets that way?
We're trying on that. But they appear to be having their own fights. Somebody called Christian was kicked out of that very early this morning, and turns out we know why now. But in all seriousness, with the ERG, and I'm sure Paul has something interesting to say later, it's been a bit sort of everything's been a bit tricky today, I think, for Tory party management, because originally, early on this morning, the whipping operation managed to upset quite a few of the, I'll call them pork pie plotters, after Alicia Melbray, after Alicia Kearns, I believe, the MP for Moulton Melbray, where the pork pie's from, because 20 of them met yesterday. They discussed Boris Johnson's future. They believe he didn't really have one as their leader and the Prime Minister, so they decided to go against him in no confidence terms. Now, what that led to was a huge amount of speculation and a lot of pressure on Mr. Johnson today. 12 MPs submitted letters, as I said earlier. But what happened afterwards was just before PMQs, about 11:50 a.m. or so, a local paper in Bury, broke the story that an MP, their MP, and Neil Channing is going to crucify me if I don't get this wrong. It's going to be another Chesham and saga. You Christian Wakeford, correct?
You got it.
Christian Wakeford, thank God for that.
I mean,
credibility
it does feel like a waste of time learning it. He is going to be like the smallest news story in the next 5 years. He'll be a pub trivia guy in like 10 years' time. Nobody will remember this guy.
Well, on the 10th anniversary of the polling station, then there you go. We got some questions for the quiz. But anyhow, he defected. Huge story. Really blew up Westminster. Massive optical win, I must say, I think, in the short term for Keir Starmer and Labour. Longer term, not exactly sure. There'll be pressure for a by-election. It will upset, I think, a few people who aren't fans of MPs switching parties, defecting, and then not having the by-election. And of course, nothing about him really screams Labour. Even with the current Labour Party position, he seemed to be out of step. But the image of him in a Union Jack mask directly behind Starmer was a big win for him today. And I have to say, I think he won PMQs, and I think he won it really easily.
Would you agree, Neil?
Well, to be honest, I didn't think that although it's always fun to see, stories of people crossing the floor and stuff like that. And you were right, it was the first one, Tory to Labour since 2007. We've had Tory to Lib Dem much more recently, and lots of Tory to Independent as well. I'm not sure that this is a long-term win for Labour. They might think, well, look, it's good to show red wall voters that voted Tory that it's a good way of reinforcing their message that these people are not happy with what they've been given by Boris Johnson, and that they want to sort of say to those people there's a safe home. Of course, the real problem that we've had over sort of 40 years in politics, 1997 Labour have a really big vote, and then 2005 and 2010 they lose. Turnout in those two elections is right down, and it's particularly among sort of the under 40s, basically, as people become disillusioned with politics and start to think, that famous focus group expression, they're all the same. And really, under Corbyn, whatever people think about Corbyn, Labour had a completely different strategy, which was to engage younger voters and get more people to register. Huge numbers of people registering to vote for the first time in 2017. Obviously, Keir Starmer's team have decided to go back to the sort of old New Labour tactic of saying that if you can win somebody over for the Tories, that's like winning 2 votes. And trying to get new people to come and vote for the first time is really hard. It's not going to be made easier by the legislation going through this week on voter ID. Obviously, the fact that Starmer's so celebratory about this Tory guy with some pretty offensive views coming and joining the Labour Party shows that he doesn't see that as a problem. But of course, he's being advised by Peter Mandelson, who famously said of the sort of younger and more left-wing people, well, who else are they going to vote for? And of course, what Mandelson, he never really learned that lesson, which is that they don't go and vote for somebody else. They just don't vote.
They don't vote at all.
I think it is a way of turning people off politics.
Yeah, that's actually fascinating in terms of Labour is going, and lots of chat about Tony Blair and his knighthood and where they've been since those days. Will there be a vote of confidence call by the party against Boris Johnson before February 1st, 2022? 5 to 6 each of two, Paul Krishnamurty. This is a market you've been all over. You've been all over shorting Boris in terms of 2022 in general. How long will he survive?
Well, I think it's imminent, but I mean, look, not far be it from me to quote Dan Hodges and Harry Cole. They're both saying.
But now, let me quote Dan Hodges.
Yeah, they're saying the names are going to be in imminently within the next half an hour or something. I think that they know that there are easily 54 names, right? Easily 54 people prepared to send letters in, but they're not going to send the letters in until they are absolutely confident that they will win a vote of no confidence, right? So that is the question. I'm not convinced that there is a rearguard action in favour of Boris Johnson, because if you look at the people who have come out to defend him, they're the usual suspects. Nadine Dorries, Nazim Zahawi, Jacob Rees-Mogg, Priti Patel. These are people who owe their career to Boris Johnson. You know, you could have relied on those people at any point in the last 5 years to come out and do his bidding for him. I think that David Davis, a Brexiteer, is probably a better straw in the wind, that he would come out and openly call for, in the name of God, go, as he said to Boris Johnson in Parliament today. I think that the defection to Labour is quite significant. It's not in huge grand scheme of things, but it's symbolic. On the same week that we've seen a 13% lead for Labour, right, and a couple of tens, they're winning. There are these moments in politics when it's quite clear that the tectonic plates are shifting and one party's power is shifting to the other side. And to the median Tory MP, that matters. They can see that Boris Johnson's losing it, and I do not think they will want to persist with him. Their only worry is that, of course, if they lose the vote of no confidence, he's safe for a year. But I do think they'll go through with it rather than let the bleeding carry on.
Who replaced him, Neil?
Well, it's interesting, isn't it? Because when the market was quite weak, and these markets on next leader, they stumble along, and not many people have a bet most of the time on an average week. And then every time something like this happens, where we're talking about a vote of no confidence being imminent, suddenly people start to pump money into the market. So moves that happen in the other times, the kind of inverted commas off season, are really less significant. So we had sort of a 3-month period where everybody started talking about Liz Truss. She was very popular on the Conservative Home site with their sort of weekly survey of who's in and who's out. And she got really smashed in. I mean, her price 6 months ago was kind of 10 to 1. There was a time where she was trading at around 7 to 2. I think now the proper money's come in and people have started to look around and think, well, who is it actually going to be? Rishi Sunak's been a lot stronger and Liz Truss has really weakened. I kind of feel like lots of people sort of talk about a third candidate because everybody remembers the situation when Margaret Thatcher went and we were talking about Michael Heseltine and Michael Buttillo, and suddenly, through the middle came John Major. And of course, everyone remembers that great Yes Prime Minister, how Jim Hacker behaved. It's a very similar, that was a very similar kind of situation where the one that nobody really liked that much, but wasn't offensive to anyone, kind of swept through the middle. I think lots of people are sort of talking about that and saying, oh, maybe there's an outside candidate that can come in. I really don't think so. I think when you see the kind of numbers, the polling that they do on this, they are asking Conservative members. It's the actual people that are voting. And it really does look to be between Rishi Sunak and Liz Truss. I personally think, it should be kind of 10 to 1 on that it's one of those two rather than where it is at the moment. I think Sunak should be odds on. Really.
Well, how are the markets shaping up in terms of the bets that Star Sports have taken in terms of Boris's political demise and the next Prime Minister, which now has actually Keir Starmer out to sevens because of Boris's troubles.
Yeah, so in terms of the bets, I think the market is just sort of readjusting and getting ready for what feels like an inevitable contest for Boris Johnson's successor. It's amazing. You could have got, just in the last week, 7-4, even 2-1 about Sunak. Now he's 5-4 with us. And as Neil says, if you're going purely by the polling, then we have a sort of another Joe Biden situation, right? Where you're staring at what should be like a 2s or 3s on shot if you're taking the polls, the only ones that we've had conducted at face value. And you're getting 5-4 about him because of the perceived uncertainty about who he might run against. But at the moment, we've only really seen Penny Mordaunt sort of have her hat thrown in the ring, and even then she hasn't confirmed. She's now more close to 10s and like 20s, 25s. But even then, is there anybody that Sunak doesn't beat if you have the contest tomorrow? And even Tory members polled by opinion or whatever, these are British Polling Council members giving these, well, not estimates, but giving these analyses, and he's absolutely smoking each and every one of his rivals.
When you look at the people that can be considered to be more, to the left of Sunak in Tory terms, you're probably looking at, I know it seems a bit ridiculous to say, but Jeremy Hunt and Tom Tugendhat, certainly.
Yeah.
But given that this parliamentary party is the most right-wing Tory bunch of MPs that we've ever had, and the Tory membership is, very much to the right of, public opinion, it's really hard to see them electing anybody for leader who, had any kind of Remainer ideas or, is considered to be woke or anything like that. Like, they're looking for somebody that's got ERG approval, aren't they?
In that sense, then, I'd be wary of Sunak. In that sense, if that's right, Neil, I agree, they're going to pick someone right wing. I'd be wary of Sunak. I think that Sunak has powerful backers, right? And he has a good brand at the moment, principally because of furlough, right? But we don't really know where the Conservative Parliamentary Party stands on a lot of things, right? There's a lot of new MPs there. There's, Sunak hasn't been around that long. And as far as I'm aware, he hasn't, worked the tea room, prodigiously. I think Liz Truss was voted Politician of the Year in The Spectator, right, which is quite an accolade for those people. And I think once we get the campaign, if there's genuinely a multi-candidate contest, let's say it's 5 or 6 minimum, right, I think it could be all to play for in who does well at hustings, because none of these candidates are that well defined. I mean, I don't know where I would place Penny Mordaunt, for example, on that ideological spectrum at all, right?
I think I saw an interesting tweet today from Michael Walker, which I'm going to kind of, I might have stolen for myself, but somebody might have spotted it. He said that Sunak's got a kind of a sort of what's the word I'm looking for, like a golden spot. In the public at large think that, he's Mr. Splash It All Around because he came up with the furlough scheme and spent a lot of money on the original kind of COVID recovery package. But the party, the people that are, particularly the MPs, who are the gatekeepers to picking who the final 2 will be, think of him as a hard right Thatcherite and a fiscal hawk, and that's what they like. So, he sort of manages to be all things to all people on the economy. Although I would say he definitely is a fiscal hawk and a Thatcherite.
But that could all unravel, right? That could all unravel during a leadership contest. I mean, let's say Sajid Javid runs, right? I think he would. I don't see why he wouldn't, right? Ran last time.
No, I agree, but I don't.
Sajid Javid is Thatcherite. Sajid Javid is very much a Thatcherite.
I agree, although he did, he lost quite badly last time.
Right, but then Boris Johnson was taking more than half the votes, and Brexit was on. He'd voted for Remain, so it was implausible for a lot of people. I do think this is it's potentially wide open, and I think let's look at Tory leadership contests over the years. If you take away the last one, which was in a particularly dramatic, unique situation where Parliament was deadlocked, general election coming, Brexit Party destroying the Tories, etc. Right? All the other ones, the favourite got beat. The favourite lost.
Quite a small sample.
Ian Duncan Smith, 33-1.
I think first of all, I think it's quite a small sample size. Secondly, I would say that
Cameron was the favourite. Cameron was full.
I've seen a lot of people saying, well, chancellors don't do very well in Tory leadership elections. Again, there's ridiculously short sample size and looking at recent.
Not that short. Well, hang on. Let's go back here, right? We go back. Reginald Maudling in the 60s was favourite. He lost.
Yeah, but we're talking.
Who was favourite against Thatcher? Who was favourite against Thatcher? Whoever was favourite against Thatcher, he lost. Heseltine lost. William Hague wasn't favourite at all. He was nowhere near favourite. Ian Duncan Smith was nowhere. David Cameron was fourth in the betting, right? And let's take David Cameron. He was dismissed as he's just for the future. He's just putting a name forward. And then one good speech at the conference, and suddenly he's swept up because he dominated the focus group.
Can I put this to William there, actually? William, in terms of that vote, are we dealing with a functional party at this stage?
I'd argue not now. And they need time. And this is one of the things that I think is making this market that we have sort of really interesting and competitive. The Tory party, as of yet, isn't yet sure, I don't think, what it wants its success to be, where it wants its success to come from, and where it wants its successor to stand. I think they know what they'd like the successor to do, but apart from that, I think it's all a bit up in the air. And this, I think, at the moment, I think it helps Rishi Sunak because he's politically flexible enough he can move in different directions. I also think it helps Penny Mordaunt to a point. I think it's a net negative for everybody else. But I agree with the points broadly made there. And I think that's going to be something that's going to put real pressure on them. Because if you don't get this done by February, what is the point really now of then doing it before April or May? When you get the chance to tie Johnson up with the cost of living crisis, the energy bills, inflation, and not just that, not just the domestic issues, foreign ones as well. What might happen with regards to Ukraine, which is going to be a very serious situation. It appears to be, oh, my apologies.
It's okay, we can still hear you.
Oh, perfect.
Of course, you're forgetting as well that if they do keep him, it's possible that the Daily Mirror have got 8 more things stuck up their sleeve to come out with.
That is fair.
Which we'll never hear about.
That is where we are, isn't it? That is where we are. I mean, clearly, it strategically made no sense to get rid of him before the local elections, and that was the plan. But events have taken over, and they've got to stop the bleeding. And at the moment, it's just 24/7 kill Boris in the news.
I'm just interested, Neil. So just Neil, what does all this mean for the Labour Party and for Sir Keir Starmer this year in terms of he's been just sitting away in the background? He's obviously got a defector today of questionable kind of Labour, ticks in the boxes. What does this mean for Labour? Because Boris's demise is not good news for Labour.
No, definitely. I mean, obviously they're doing particularly well in the polls now, but people are being asked, as we know. That's by
default.
People are being asked the question, which we all know. If there was a general election tomorrow, who will you vote for? And the very simple fact is there isn't going to be a general election tomorrow. There's not going to be a general election until May 2024 or possibly even November 2024. That's why there's such a big, Labour can easily be 14 points ahead, and the betting market on who wins the most seats the next election was barely shifted. Because the whole political landscape is going to have changed by then. If Keir Starmer, pursues the policy of saying Boris Johnson's an idiot, he's very poor at managing the country, I'm going to be sensible and much better at managing the country, That's great when you're up against Boris Johnson, because of course everyone will agree with that. But if Rishi Sunak comes in, who's his personal approval ratings in the country have dropped a bit in the last few months, but that's from a fair high point where they were when everyone was thinking, well, he seems good, he comes on the TV every now and then and gives us 6 months off work on 80% pay. And once he stopped doing that, he became less popular. But I think that it's going to be a lot harder battle for Labour against, well, pretty much anybody other than Boris Johnson. And I think if you haven't really sort of laid out your own policy platform and you're just relying on, the Tories basically messing up and people getting fed up with them, it can work. For sure it can work. The Tories have been in for a long time.
But they are getting, people are getting.
Clearly, we're having a cost of living crisis coming up, inflation, whatever. I'm sure Labour can do quite well in the short term. But don't forget, the Tories have done a couple of things in the last week that are really not reflected in the market on the next general election, in putting the voter ID bill through. Later in the summer, they're going to be gerrymandering the new constituencies. And, even with a 13-point lead in the polls, Labour only get either a very tiny majority or it's still a hung parliament. They need to be something like 16 points ahead. And I don't want to go on too long, but you can go back to times in the run up to the 2015 election when Ed Miliband was 12 points ahead, and you can go back to times under Gordon Brown in 2008 and 9, where he was, quite nicely ahead and then lost. So I don't think you can read too much into being 13 points up. And I think really just because of the voter ID and the new boundary changes, I would still be quite bearish of Labour's chances in an election.
Paul,
I wouldn't be at all. I think it's turned. I think the number of things there. Right, I agree. You're right. And 13 points is an outlier. Obviously, we're in a moment of crisis, right? But it's very hard to turn a 13-point deficit into a lead. And the big picture for me is look how many voters now support non-Tory, so-called progressive parties, right? And we saw this in North Shropshire, right, where people are willing to now jump behind whoever it takes to beat the Tories. Things have changed. We're not in the same world, say. So let's take the Miliband lead, right? When Miliband was leading, UKIP were on like 20%, right? And we know that UKIP at that time were particularly hurting the Tory party. And that was always going to fall back a bit. And as it was, they ended up taking some Labour votes, right? So that wasn't necessarily reflective. I would say what Labour are doing, I mean, I don't particularly think Starmer is an impressive leader at all. I think strategically it's very smart. You let them destroy themselves, right? They are presiding over a cost of living crisis. They've got no solutions to anything. You let them do that, and you don't reveal your policies early. That's the craziest thing to do because the other side will misrepresent them or steal them. What you do is you have tiny little minuscule changes in policy, like the energy policies they've laid out, and you say, look, here, we've got a practical, workable policy. They haven't, right? You keep doing that, and then come the last year before the election, you roll out your pledge card like Blair used to, and you say, we will build X amount of houses. We will cut waiting times in the NHS. We will have 5 very popular measures, right? And you blow them away. And I would also say, I mean, they have now got a team that is competent. They do now are beginning to get a team. Wes Streeting is competent on the TV.
Yeah, well, I just don't agree. I agree with almost nothing that you just said, Paul. I mean, basically, the party's virtually bankrupt. They've come out today. They've got people talking about how we need a 5% pay rise to cope with this inflation. The Labour Party itself has just offered its employees a 2% pay rise. They haven't got a full copy of the data of all of their members now because of a hack. They done a compromise of data, and they're now facing a potential lawsuits which are going to bankrupt them. The unions are deserting them and not putting money in. The big donors, even though they're 13 points ahead, there's not a sniff of a big donor going anywhere near them. I just think it's wildly
the big donors, if they're 13% ahead, if they're 5% ahead in election year, the big donors will come. That's how
they certainly can't afford.
And they wait until
they certainly don't have enough money in the bank to, if a general election was happening tomorrow, they couldn't even afford to stand in all the constituencies.
I've heard it before. They said that in 2010. They said that. I'm not saying I disagree with you. There's many internal issues within the Labour Party that are really badly run, etc. But we are in a position where you've got an unpopular government, and the
I agree. But I think
behaving like it will.
I mean, I'm not defending Boris Johnson. Boris Johnson's clearly very unpopular. What I see in the polling, and what you must surely see if you look at it closely, is that people are not deserting the Tories to go to Labour. They're deserting the Tories to go to don't know.
Or Lib Dem or Green.
But on that poll, like,
it's a bit different, isn't it?
The people who elected Boris in a landslide in 2019, do they somewhat look at themselves now? I could not believe that result at the time. They somewhat look at themselves now and say, well, this isn't a massive surprise.
But don't forget the reason. Like, even if when people talk about these red wall constituencies as if people uniformly switch from Labour to Tory in those constituencies, that's not really what happened. What actually happened is that the population of younger people in those constituencies, and by younger I'm talking under 55 because I'm 54 and I consider myself young, but you know, people that aren't pensioners still voted Labour in those constituencies. But what actually happened was the population of people of those ages in a lot of these northern towns and Midlands towns that are ex-industrial and a little way out of a big city, the population of those kind of people dropped because the younger people, if you're young and you've got an education and you live within 30 miles of Sheffield or Leeds or Birmingham or Newcastle or Liverpool or Manchester, that's where you go and work and live. So the people that are left living in those places, there's a higher proportion of over 65s, people that get their news from television media and you know, BBC politics and read red top newspapers. And those people, you know, if you're reading The Sun every day, you're reading the Daily Mail, you're still thinking Boris is doing quite a good job.
There's another massively critical factor about that, Neil. Those people, that is right, that is what happened in those seats. But think about pensioners in the last 10 years. That's the one group of people that have not had their incomes cut, right? They did not, you know, they've been guaranteed an income, so when austerity did not directly hit them, right? Now you have 5%, 6% inflation, you have council tax.
And the triple lock's gone,
all of that. Watch them desert the Tories. Right?
Well, yeah, but then I agree. Obviously, I agree with that, but you know, and if you live on a fixed income, that should be a significant situation for you. But they've also seen their house prices zoom up because of the money that was invested into the stamp duty cut, you know, and the quantitative easing. You know, property prices are going up 14% a year. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, but that's not necessarily much of a factor if you're elderly and you live in Redcar and you can't draw upon that money in your house, right? But your fixed income is going down. And the point, and you've also got, I mean, you have to look, 2019 was an extreme situation because of Brexit, because of Corbyn, because of all of these
and
things.
Jeremy Corbyn.
Yeah, there were particular extreme things pushing people in. We're in a far more fluid situation now. And it's not surprising that a government that has low approvals on policy that isn't delivering is crumbling. And what we now have is, I can't stress enough the importance of the other parties here. The Lib Dems, the way I see it is the Lib Dems will take 20 or 30 seats off the Tories next time. And they can take on the majority in its own right.
Yeah, when you actually break it down and look at which seats they're going to do it in, they don't have 30 target seats that are winnable. If they have 30 if they have 30 North Shropshires, but they have 100,000 members, they can't have 10,000 people going to every marginal constituency on election day. We've seen the Lib Dems do it in by-elections before and then not repeat it in the general. I think the Lib Dems could have a really good, hang on, let me finish. I think the Lib Dems could have a really good general election and they could win all their target seats. I think there's like 18 where they're second to the Tories with like a 6% swing or less. Yeah, they could win all of those. But that means they end up with like 25 MPs, which is great because it's much better than the sort of 7, 8, 9, 10 that they've had in the last few years. But it doesn't necessarily, you know, it's an 80-seat majority we're trying to.
Last word on this, Paul.
Let's do that. Let's say they take, even if they, firstly, I'd say remember 1997, remember 2001. There were a lot more seats than you might think if you've got tactical voting could come into play. But let's just say you're right, and they only take 18, right? Well, that's the
18
Tories.
would be a really good result for them.
Let's say they take 18, right?
That would be really strong.
340s or something. If the Tories don't get 315 seats, they're out of power. There will be a coalition, right? They haven't got any coalition partners left, the Tories, right? This particular, where they have gone, where they have moved the party into this hard right, ultra Brexiteer position, they aren't going to get anyone to support them. So it makes perfect sense for the other parties to just let them implode and then tactically vote against them.
We are going to have to wrap up. Last word to you, William.
Okay, so just
gone down the pub.
No, it's just very dark where I am. Okay, so just on the structure or the structural issues for Labour ahead of the next general election, yeah, they're very big. And Starmer is going to need a sort of Lord Sainsbury style saviour at some point if he's going to sort of launch that general assault, because the Labour Party, it is not moving towards a sort of big membership that can hit the ground the way that Momentum did for Corbyn. And that is not a political comment on whether I like Momentum or not, whether I like the party leadership or not. I'm sorry, it's just the truth. They have lost up 200,000 and they'll need every single person they can get. Regarding, Paul, that's some really interesting thoughts about the incomes of older people, and especially the media. I think this is a particular driver in why we're seeing Johnson under so much threat now. There has been an editorial swing against him. It'll be very interesting to see what happens if somebody other than Truss or Sunak jumps in and begins to get a bit of momentum into that next Tory leader race, because we've seen lots of times go for Truss, and I think Sunak will get plenty back in too. We are a bit far away from all that stuff at the moment, but one thing I would say is today and in the last week, there has been an update from the Resolution Foundation of the scale of poverty in the UK. Now, again, this is heavily dependent on turnout or whatever, but whoever takes over the Tory party is not going to jump into some ready-made open goal election. It is going to be difficult. You are facing an opposition leader in Keir Starmer and an opposition Labour Party, who at the very least are just not anywhere near as reviled by the populist sort of press or the red tops as Jeremy Corbyn was, not nowhere near, who have momentum, as in political momentum, not the campaign group, who are emboldened, I think, or will at least be emboldened to attack, who probably have a better balance now than when Starmer actually started, and also, again, who have a lot of things they can take aim at the government for. And listen, it might be that this energy crisis is just linked to the price of wholesale gas going up. Well, the financial crisis was just linked to subprime mortgages in the US, by and large. What happened afterwards? You know, it is not going to be as simple, I think. As Sunak wins, there's a big reset, and the Tories win by 5 or 10 points next election. I think it's going to be very, very difficult. And the next election is going to be a bit of a fight. It's going to be a proper fight, I think, at this point in time.
Yeah, and I just hope that people look at populism in terms of the results of Brexit and the result of that 2019 election. People are looking for simple answers like get Brexit done. Brexit isn't even remotely done. That was the one thing people just jumped on. Brexit done. They didn't like Corbyn. Brexit is nowhere near done. It's been an absolute mess. And here we are. I think this is entirely predictable. We could stay here all night. Paul Krishnamurty, Neil Channing and William Kedjanyi. That would polling station. We'll probably be back in an hour, actually, because everything will have changed by then. If not, we'll see you next week.
Pre-recorded.
Thank you.
Bring it on. Bring it on.
Thanks,
Cheers.
guys.
Thanks, guys.
Thank
See
you.
later.